Good morning, Mike. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Tell us how the race stands and where people can find your website right out of the top so I don't forget it.
I love that. Thanks, Hugh. It is Rogers, Rogers, for Senate .com. And that's the best place to get a hold of us, and you can get connected to the campaign. We're doing great. We had a poll last week that had us down 2 within the margin of error. And our opponents, like many of these competitive Senate seats, are just pouring money from outside of the state into this. They've spent $37 million on my opponent and can't get her up to 50%. So this is important for us. We're in this stretch. They are still coming in, still pounding us pretty hard. But we're in this thing. We just Hugh, and here's how. By the way, we've got the first ground game we've had in this state this extensive, probably in 30 years. We just crossed about 3 million doors and phones in voter contact. We haven't done that in a very long time here. So we're getting people fired up, motivated. If they're not registered at the door, but they want to vote for us, we're getting them registered to vote, and we're getting them turned on to show up. And this is really going to be put your jersey on, show up to vote kind of an election. And so we're working really hard to that end.
RogersForSenate.com. Is the FOR spelled out, Mike?
Yes, sir. FOR.
RogersFOR Senate.com. Small dollar donors are needed and welcome. Mike Rogers,
Yes,
I want to begin by asking you, Michigan's an interesting state. You have a large Arab American population. I know them well. I would often go into Detroit when I went to law school at the U and know that Dearborn is very Arab American. You also have a very large Jewish population, American population. So the war must cut both ways. However, I believe a lot of Arab Americans are Lebanese, and they don't want Israel to have to invade Lebanon, but it looks like that's going to happen because Hezbollah will not stop. What do you hear out on the trail in the state, which has got a very large Arab American population, a very large Jewish American population?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there is lots of concern on both ends, and a lot of the both of those communities have families back in the region, so that also heightens their anxiety. But here's the interesting part of this. I think the Arab Muslims in around Dearborn and Hamtramck, I don't know if you saw, but the Hamtramck mayor Muslim came out and endorsed Trump, said it's just too important. They're starting, I
I
think, to
did.
understand that you don't want a conflict, and if you don't want a conflict, you don't want a Harris Walz administration. They're going to continue doing what has gotten us here in the first place, and added to the conflict. And what you see in Israel, by the way, Hugh, is them playing. This is an they're trying to stem what would be an effective Hezbollah through Tehran attack into Israel. And so what you see happening isn't them being offensive; it's being them preemptive on trying to make sure that Hezbollah can't come across the border. But what the Muslims here are saying, hey, listen, we kind of get it. We didn't have this problem when Donald Trump was elected, and when Republicans were in charge. I think that's what you're seeing, this shift in the Muslim side and the Jewish side. I mean, listen, I'm not sure how you vote for Democrats given what's going on in the Middle East. If you're, if you're Jewish and American and care about Israel, but there's still a bunch of them. They feel this loyal and obligation to Democrats, and we're going to see a chunk of that. But we don't have to get them all. We just need to get the folks who don't really want conflict, who want a more stable Middle East, and want an economy that's prosperous for everybody.
Mike Rogers, I have two questions about the people that you meet out on the campaign trail. One, how often do they bring up the Israel Hamas, Israel Hezbollah, Israel Iran conflict? And how often do they bring up the cost of living relative to each other? I just really do not know because I lean into national security. I follow it very closely, but I know I bought a half gallon of milk yesterday. And my eyes went through my head, and I don't normally do that. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt is out of town.
Yeah, no, it is all groceries, all costs, all the time. Very rarely do I get the question. Obviously, when I'm in the southeast part of Michigan where there's bigger Arab populations and Jewish populations, I get those questions. But it is very rarely the first question. That first question is all about cost. I mean, people are using food pantries this, the last couple of days of the month here, Hugh, to feed their family. And these are working people. These aren't people who are waiting around waiting for the government to send them a check. These are working folks who are just absolutely horrified they have to do this. think of this, about half of Michiganders could not sustain a $400 emergency event in their household, meaning if your refrigerator goes out or your stove goes out or something, they would have a very difficult time trying to come up with the money to repair it. It's really bad, and that's why I think you see the polls here in Michigan so tight. Is that the Democrats are have a machine here, no doubt, but they're telling people that are struggling every day at the grocery store that you're not really struggling. They know it. They know gas prices now. The Democrats are trying to pour money out the door here. They're cleaning out the federal vault, trying to buy votes. They just announced a $300 million battery plant conversion here in the state. Democrats are cheering, and people who work for a living are thinking, "What in God's green earth are you doing to us? 40% less labor with this plan." I mean, they just don't see a hopeful an opportunity in the future if the Democrats continue to do what they're doing.
Now, Mike Rogers for the national audience, and I want the national audience to understand they can contribute to rogersforsenate.com, ROGERSFOR, Senate.com. You are an FBI alum. You were an agent. A lot of people have lost confidence in the Bureau. And if you're in the Senate, I would expect you to be on Judiciary to help reform the Bureau. When Ron DeSantis said, we're going to run our own investigation of the second assassination attempt of President Trump, some took that as a criticism of the Bureau. How did you view it?
There is an incredible lack of faith in Department of Justice. It has become way too politicized. And back when I was an agent, the FBI had a more independent standing from DOJ and could say no on investigations. That just doesn't seem to be happening. And I'm questioning some things. Listen, I was an old school agent. I was called a brick agent. I went out and worked cases, and we worked murder cases and bombing cases and extortion and human trafficking, the kinds of things you want your bureau to do to protect our communities. And they have just seemed to gotten far afoot from that. And their arrogance, and they've always been arrogant. I always told them that when I was in Congress, is getting a little bit ahead of public confidence, and we have got to turn that around to get their public confidence back. It does need some reform. They took a lot of decisions from field offices and put them back into Washington, D.C. I think that's a mistake. I think they ought to roll that back. And then they ought to look carefully about the kind of people they're hiring for the kind of purpose and mission that they want to accomplish. I talked to agents who just retired, and they're telling me that the flavor of those agents is very different, and they don't have the same kind of commitment to law and order. They stop and ponder a lot about the politics, and that just should not be the order of the day in the FBI. And there's important work to
Mike,
do.
I haven't known an FBI agent for probably 3 decades, but the last one I knew, Philip, who might be listening, came out of the academy down at Quantico and was assigned to Buffalo. And people don't know that you get sent places as a bureau agent. You get moved around. Where did you begin your career? Was it in Michigan?
No, Chicago. I wanted to do two
Ooh.
things when I was in the FBI. I wanted to either chase Soviet spies, and I know I'm dating myself, or I wanted to chase gangsters. And I was successful enough at the academy. I got Chicago, and I got on the organized crime squad there. Which, candidly, Hugh, if they'd have told me I had to pay him to do it, I probably would have. It was an amazing experience, very gratifying. And I think we did make a positive impact on a lot of communities that were under the grip of, organized crime. And that's the
Did
kind of
you ever
bureau
get,
you want.
I got to chase Soviet spies at Justice as the special assistant for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. And there was no National Security Division then. It was just the Bureau would bring in the warrant that would come to me and then go to the Chief of Staff and then go to the AG. Mike, did you ever get to chase Soviets?
No, not directly. What we did do when I was a younger agent in Chicago, they had some technology transfer issues where the Russians were just exceptionally good about coming in and kind of befriending these professors that had access to national lab material. I'll leave it at that. And so they were very, very good. And these professors, most of them meaning well, think they want to share, they want to grow, and so I did work a couple of those cases in the beginning, and they were just getting schnookered. So I didn't necessarily get
I
to
bring this
chase.
up, Mike, as a closing appeal for getting you into the Senate. China is stealing us blind, and they are whatever the Soviets were times 10 is what the Chinese comms are doing right now. Do people in Michigan know that? Do they know that we have a national security threat? greater than the Soviet threat was at the height of the Cold War?
I don't know if they know it's greater than the height of the Cold War, but they're starting to get the idea. We have China is a campaign issue. It is a problem. We're going to have to confront them in a way that doesn't have to lead to conflict, but it does. It will absolutely lead to some economic, grading on each country. So they're starting to get that, and they know that China is the one that's going to steal these manufacturing jobs, especially the way that the Democrats are putting down these mandates, trying to tell you what kind of car to drive, and more importantly, telling the companies what kind of cars they have to build. That's where the disaster is happening in Michigan. And we got layoffs, 2,400 at Stellantis, 1,000 at GM. Ford is announcing it, all because of these big mandates from the federal government. The Harris-Walz administration that wants to be has doubled down on this, including my opponent, by the way, who said, I won't vote for EV mandates, went back to Washington and voted for EV mandates. It is the pressure on
Wow.
them to turn this thing around is bad. And so, yeah, from that perspective, Hugh, they do know.
Michigan is winnable for the Republicans. Mike Rogers is a great candidate. RogersForSenate.com. RogersFor Senate.com. Go and help him out. Thank you, Mike. Come back again. Keep coming back
Thanks,
until the
sir.
election. It
Yes,
is
sir.
very, very vitally important that we get Mike Rogers in the Senate.